Hi everyone, this is Nasim, your teacher at the Richmond Hill Art School. Hope everyone is safe, is feeling well, and I know these are very harsh days for everyone. We're going, all of us being through a lot, and I just thought in these harsh days, in these days that we all need to be close to one another and take care of one another, I could just share a nice project or something that I like to do as more of a fun project, very relaxing. I have filmed all the step-by-step videos, so you could be using them nicely. And I know a lot of you, like Natalie, I know she's really good in using watercolors, and most of you will have watercolors at home. But what I'll be showing you is how to use them in a less traditional way. I'll try to mix it with ink pens. And actually the demo that I'll be doing will be about this mushroom, how to do that, how to use ink pens. And rubber cement is the only thing that you will need to buy extra. It's just the normal glue that you get at Michael's or even dollar stores, super cheap, super easy. What I'm showing in the demo is going to be a mushroom, but you could have any types of plants, anything you like. I really want you guys to be loosen up and try to use the ink pens very loose, and I'll show you step by step. Or you could have something that's like really under the water if you like the creatures that are underwater, and marine creatures if you like them. So the subject is not a big deal. I like things that are more organic, and I think underwater works usually very nice to have watercolor on it. It shows the fluid effect on it. So give it a try and let me know how is the process. How did you like it or not? Show me the results, and again, be safe, stay safe. We can go through this harsh days all together. See you next time. Bye. Okay, in terms of materials, let's start with the paper. The best scenario would be having hot press 100% cotton watercolor paper. You can see that. I think it's a Fabriano, it's an Italian brand, it's usually the best. It's a very smooth kind of paper, not much texture. But I know this is kind of an expensive paper, so if you're just doing tests and tryouts, I will put that away and I just go with the normal watercolor paper or mixed media paper. It only depends on the size you want. You would see these ones these are the cold press that have a little bit of a texture. You can see in the light, you can see the texture. I'm not a big fan, but if you are and you just want to spend less money, you could start with a cold press and like a normal paper like that. In terms of the watercolors I don't use anything fancy. It's just normal Pelican. I think it's a German brand, very cheap brand. And every once in a while when I run out of some colors, I like the koi ones. They're very affordable and I don't see a lot of a difference between this and that or any other professional brands. And so yeah, don't go very picky on the type. Even if you have, I would say, even if you have some kind of inks, I like to use colored inks as well. They would do the same job. They're very transparent as well. So the other thing, definitely you need to create this washy effects and these white parts. It's rubber cement, which is basically a glue. I get it from Michael's here in Canada. I'm sure in the States it's available at Michael's as well. It's a type of glue, basically, rubber cement. It's a little smelly, stinky, but it dries very fast. You can see it's very kind of goopy as a glue. You will need ink pens, definitely. I like to use the Uni pens. Unipin, I think it's a very universal brand. And the Micron, they have different sizes. I have 0.1 or 0.5 in here, but make sure, I don't know, every part of the world has this different brands. Make sure whatever brand it is, it's water fade, waterproof, and fade proof. So that's very important because you don't want it to be smearing once you add the watercolor, right? Brushes, make sure they're soft watercolor ones, soft, preferably sable ones. You can see they're the soft ones. Don't use the bristle ones that are thick, and I preferably like them to be round. And last thing, that's probably what all of you already have it, it's an etch or 2H pencil, because we're gonna draw the mushroom first. Actually, etch is my favorite. Make sure you're not using anything that has a B, 2B, or 3B, because it will create some kind of smudges. And an eraser, simple eraser, so in case we make some mistakes. So let's go and start the process. Okay, as you can see, I have put my watercolor paper in here at the back of a simple board or something that's stiff you could use. I like to use the back of my pads. Yeah. And make sure you tape it all the way nicely and not only corners or one part, because if you don't do that, after when you add the watercolor or any kind of wet media, this whole thing's gonna start having buckling up and having all those air bubbles, and it's not nice, especially when you want to frame it afterwards. So anytime you're using any types of wet media, it's good to tape it all the way. I'm just using normal drafting, which can easily come off. You can see here it comes off easily and it doesn't ruin the paper. Or magic tape, it's another option. So let's start drawing very lightly the mushroom, and I'm not gonna do the whole thing. I'm just gonna do these 3 pieces in here. Today I like to use my etch pencil as usual, which is my favorite, and it doesn't give any mess. So very simply I'm gonna draw the mushroom. Very simple contour outlines. I'm not going to details. The details are for later on, and once you are inking. Sorry, that should have been smaller in here. Yeah, the mushrooms might look a little different right now, but as long as they look like mushrooms, they're fine. So I'm just putting just a basic idea of where goes what. Yeah, adding a few more details. Again, I am not a fan of adding too many details in a drawing. I like to add them mostly when we are going to the inking or when we add color paint to it. So just as an indication, I think that would be enough. Few of these leaves. You can see how loose I draw, and if there's some extra lines that you're not gonna be using, erase them, because once you add watercolor to them, you cannot erase them anymore. So see how simple and how easy I drew it. Oops, a few more details in here. I think mushrooms are very cool creatures. I know there's not really creatures and they are not animals, they're not plants, something in between, but whatever they are, their shape is always fascinating to me. And they have so much variety in nature, so much. Okay, then in the next video I'm gonna show you how to do the inking. See you then. Now with our ink pen, I'm gonna start with the 0.1, which is the thinnest one. I'm gonna start the inking process. Make sure you start light first, and I like to keep it very loose. That's really part of the whimsical style. Nice and loose. Go everywhere. And then after, on the second layer, if we want some parts to be much darker, I'm gonna add some accents to make it darker. But for now, especially if your illustration is a small size, you don't need to use a very thick one. Always start light to be safer, and then if you wanted to go darker and darker, you could always go darker later on. But if you start too dark and then you don't like it, that's gonna be a problem. So you have to do the whole thing again and again. I'm not really making this in style on certain directions. I try to give lots of variety to them. Also the polka dots that we're supposed to half. A variety of sizes. Then with my bigger, thicker 1.0, I'm gonna go especially on the conjunctions. They need more attention and more thickness, more value. Try not to be very precise. Again, I find it nicer when you try working loose. And I am not following exactly on the same lines. That's nice about it. It creates multiple lines. That's another conjunction, so I'm gonna make it dark. Spirals. And at this point, I think our inking is pretty much done. Let the ink dry nicely. And when it's dried, I'm just gonna erase the lines that I don't want. If there's any left over from pencils, get rid of them. This is almost ready to be painted with watercolors. So our mushroom is nicely inked by now. If you see, there's still some lines that are not necessary. These are the previous pencil lines. I would strongly recommend to erase them before you start watercoloring them, because the minute you start watercoloring and you cover the pencil, you cannot erase anything else again. So make sure there's no lines that you do not need. Nice and clean. Now I'm gonna start with my rubber cement. I will be adding it to my foreground, which is basically the mushrooms, the 3 mushrooms and these 2 leaves, and a little bit of it in the background to create some nice textural effects. So nice and thick. I will use it on the mushroom itself to cover it. Rubber cement is basically like a masking agent, very similar to masking fluid if you have used it before, but I find it much more flexible and easy to remove compared to masking fluid, and that's why it's my favorite. I'm not being super precise, so my foreground is basically just mushrooms all covered, and as you can see, I'm gonna add some kind of accents in the background, and even if it's too much, I'm gonna remove it. That's basically for this nice cute effects that it creates in here once you add paint, so it stays white. And it's good that it's really random and accidental. And that seems to be what most people like it. Try not to have the same amount of product in everywhere. Scatter them nicely, very randomly. And I would say give it like a 10 minutes to dry. Just checking up everywhere on my foreground. Nicely having rubber cement. You don't want to add too much in parts that it already has. It might remove it if you keep adding over and over. So let's give it a nice 10-minute dry. So now the rubber cement is all nice and dry. You can see it is sticky, yes, but it's not gonna come off if you touch it. We're gonna start with the background, and I'm gonna continue it till here because I usually like to have a nice vignette around. So I'm gonna have it around here and automatically going all the way till wherever the tape is going. I like to start with lighter colors. Show that. So yellows and ochres usually are great to start with. Very washy, okay? We don't want anything too much. As the mushrooms are nicely protected, you don't have to be worried. So you could easily go over them because rubber cement is covering them anyways. And you can see those parts that there's rubber cement coverage, like in here, it's gonna stay white. Creates this nice effect. I like to go particularly darker around the mushroom, and the rest I like to keep it washy. Once you have your light color, you could start adding a little bit darker. I'm gonna start with green a little bit. A little bit of green. Yep. Especially down here where the grass is, the soil is gonna be. But keep in mind, very washy, okay? Still very washy. And if you find yourself too much paint, you just try to blend it out with some water. Very washy. Some orange might be nice, actually. You can see I'm using a lot of analogous colors, or colors that are very close to one another on the color wheel, because the rule in watercolors, like whenever you want to have a color that's very different, let's say if I want to add suddenly a blue like that, you have to wait in between layers. So you would have to let this layer dry first and then start doing that. Oops, I think the yellow is a little too lemony. Try to blend that out. So as I said, more green in here. Try not to rub the paper too much, especially if it's like one of those cheap mixed media or like an everyday watercolor paper. Not all of them are very tolerant, so I'm not rubbing it too much. If an area is still wet, let it dry and then try to add some other colors. I don't like to have all these straight strokes, that's why I kind of use more of the edge of the brush to get rid of the strokes, all these linear brush strokes. I like to keep it more natural. You can see I've already started to have some wrinkles on my paper, but don't worry about that. It will be easily fixed after it all dries because we taped the whole thing. So don't pay any attention to that. The smallest worry should be having about that. Maybe some brown, but very washy, okay? Not too intense. Since I have a little bit of green in here, so let's have more reddish, orangish browns in here, warmer ones. I'm a big fan of warm tones, especially when I use nature. When I painting botanics or plants or flowers, warms are usually working pretty well for me. So if you happen to do something like that suddenly, don't worry, this whole part is covered with rubber cement. You shouldn't be worried at all. When it dries, you just remove that, and you could do this right now like that as well. So it's not penetrating into the paper at all. It's not going to be absorbed because it's nicely covered with rubber cement. So just some accents, a few more accents, and again, I like to wait a little so it dries, and then I'm going to add a little bit of stronger tones, more reds, oranges, darker browns. In general, I advise you to keep the background light and put most of the effort or the intensity of the paint on the mushroom or the foreground itself. That's usually much better. It makes it pop out much nicely. So we'll let this dry. We might need to add a few more layers. So just gonna let that dry nicely and get back to it. Now I'm gonna start painting the mushrooms itself. So with a little bit of a smaller brush. Before, what we used for the background was bigger, but now I'm using a smaller one, but still soft and pointy. As usual, I'm gonna start with the lightest tones. Ochre, yellows. Well, it depends what kind of mushroom it is, but most mushrooms have stems that are very light. And I won't be working washy anymore. I try to be more intense because I really want the foreground to pop out. You can see I'm using colors more intense. I'll assume on the left side there's my light source. So everything, you don't have to really, it's not a must, but make sure that you are leaving some parts white. That's really the beauty of watercolor. You need some parts to be white. If you want to add some more color, I would wait so the first layer dries. You could work on somewhere else for now. Need some orange, might be nice. My orange is out of the picture. Oops, too much. I'm just gonna remove it with some water. Under the big mushroom here is gonna be mostly dark around there, we know that. Again, I like to start with some ochre. Seems to be a very useful color for me. I use it a lot. Ochre and burnt sienna. I don't like to jump directly to dark colors, so even if something is brown, I prep the layer under it with some yellow, orange, red, orange, burnt sienna, and then go there. So I can go a little bit more effective, and the brown in here as well. So you can see I'm using color much more bold in here because I want these really to pop out. It's not a background anymore. Or you could do the opposite. If you have a background that's really strong, you could have your mushroom being washy. You could have some green as well. I try not to use, like if I have green in here, try not to use too much green in there. So I'm just diluting it. Or making the other green on that side afterwards darker, stronger. This brown is nice as well. It's not too dark. Very transparent. It's gonna take a while to understand how much paint you need to go strong or non-strong. But after a few practices, you will easily get a hang of it. You can see how loose I work. For the top of the mushroom, again, I think yellow I like to add a little bit, and we said it's nice to have some parts left white, trying to create the polka dot feel, and we said let's have the light source on the left side. So I'm trying to, it's gonna be covered with red anyways, but the yellow that you put in there is gonna create a nice base, and your final result's gonna be much more natural than just a red that's out of the tube, which looks plasticky and not cooked or not natural. Again, I like to wait in between layers, so my red would go stronger if my yellow has dried. So right now I'm just getting an orange for now. but once it dries I'm gonna add stronger red, much stronger. You can see you're not getting the strong effect right now because your yellow under it is not dried yet, so it would be good to let that dry. So meanwhile I could have orange. See, I'm not really worried about being exactly in the line, getting out of it. It's not a big deal. The whole thing is whimsical, so it's gonna make it even more fun. You can see this part. Always try touching to know if it's dried or not. If it's cold, that means it's still wet. So a lot of times I think, oh, it should be dried by now, but it's really not. So don't trust your eyes. I would trust your touch. If you're touching it and it's still cold, that's definitely not dried yet. You could use a dryer for faster results. Definitely hair dryer. Sometimes use the fan of the microwave, of the oven, which is cool, saves me some time. What you have in here, so now I need to make it a little more, pushing the colors a little more. Hopefully this is dried. Oh, not yet, hasn't dried. So let's go back and work a little bit on the stem as well. Ooh. But you can see as I'm coming to the top layers, I use paint much bolder, much thicker. Not washy anymore because I really want it to stand it out. Again, if you feel it's too yellow, color it a little bit of brown. Of course, you could add some purple. Use the effects of the complements if you want. I try to use colors that are very harmonic together. I don't suddenly add something out of the palette. If I want to do that, I have to make sure that the layers under it are dried. Oops, I forgot about this little leaves. Let's have maybe a different yellow, more of a lemony yellow, since we're gonna add green in there. It's still the first layer, so it might be very washy, but once we add some greens, it would be better. And I'm gonna use a stronger green afterwards, so it doesn't blend too much with the green of the background. I just have to let this dry. Let's go back with a smaller brush now, pointiers, and doing all those lines that we got in there. Definitely darker in the center. Just using brown, you can make some blue to your brown to make a darker brown. Try not to use black. If you really need it at the very end, on certain areas, not everywhere. I'm really not a fan of black at all. It makes the whole thing look a little dirty, you know, because if you're having a city and it gets polluted in it, I do not like that. So I'd rather mix some blue with my browns to make it, oh, the sun is popping out, that's nice. You can see a little bit of air bubbles I'm having. But they will all go away once the whole thing is gonna dry, so don't worry at all. Now I think I can have some nice jet bold red, yes, because the layer under it has dried. And if you want a good strong red, I will mix the cool one, show you, the cool one and the red one together, and use it quite thick. See, I have a lot of it. For watercolor, that's really considered thick. In this technique, I don't really like to use a palette because I don't need to make very certain colors, so I try to go very wishy-washy. Whoa, that's strong already. Now the whole thing has dried. Rubber cement was dried, the mushroom is dry, and the background is dried. I noticed that I needed some little bit of more green, more definition around here. I let that dry, added more greens in there. I just noticed usually after I add watercolor that the little bit of the ink fades away, and it's normal because the watercolor covers it. It's transparent, but it still covers it, so I like to go back with my pen and add some more accents to it. make sure you are using the waterproof pen. You do not want your black ink to smear away. You do not want that. After this, I'm gonna remove all my rubber cement and see if I need a little bit of more in the background. You're gonna see that some of these are gonna get whiter like that once you remove the rubber cement. Especially on the big parts, since this is really the center of the picture, make sure it's nice and dark and defined. I would give it a few minutes to dry and then I would remove the rubber cement. Anytime you want to rub the rubber cement or add something to it, it's good to wait to dry or use the dryer. Because whenever it's wet, the paper becomes very sensitive. So you really need to give it time. You can see loose, very loose lines. I can still feel some of my rubber cement in here. Not a big deal. Once we remove it, we can see if it works or not. Now that the whole thing is dried, you can see I added the inks, so it's nice and dark, it's clear right now. So you could go over it if you wanted more darker defined outlines, but I think for me it's fine right now. I would add a little bit of splatters on it if some people like it. It creates this cool effect. It adds to the whimsicalness of it. You can see that. Make sure you're not doing too many. Make sure you are grabbing color, otherwise it's going to be all water only. And give it a few minutes to dry, and then we will remove the rubber cement. You could let the rubber cement be there, but it's going to be always sticky forever. So I like to, who knows after time what's going to happen with it. So I like to make sure that the rubber cement is removed. Now it's time to remove the rubber cement from the background. You can see all those marks are becoming much more white, more vivid, which I like. And again, if you don't like them, you could go back over with paint and go over them if there are parts that you don't like them. But try to have colors very washy, similar to it, so it doesn't look like a very big difference. Again, make sure that your background is dried. All the splatters, everything. Keep touching, and if you feel it's still rough, that means there's still rubber cement. I like to use the edge like that for bigger areas, and for smaller areas using it like that. And very last step, it's removing your tape. I think it's better to leave it for a few, maybe 1 hour actually, to remove the tape, but for the purpose of the video, and that's what I'm saying, because you could have, if you leave it like an hour, your paper is going to be nice, smooth and flat. So even now it's going to be, but it's going to have a little bit of wrinkles. Not something you want, but it's not that crucial. See how beautiful those white edges they're going to turn? And your paper is not going to be ruined at all, because drafting is really good. And voila! Oops. The last thing is just to sign it. And there we go. As you can see, our beautiful mushroom is finished, nice with a white border. As you can see, it's a little different than the original that I was working, but this one was on the smooth paper, so the effects is a little smoother, but in here there's a little bit of texture, and that's just because it's cold press. So now you can see how beautifully they look framed, and you could have series of different ones. I have a nice series of 4. And after that you could start working on different subjects with the same style. Like I have birds, I have garlic, I got the sun, and you could keep going on. Possibilities are really endless.